Hello, and welcome to Shane and Stuff, and this, the introductory episode to my new board game teaching series, The Wonderful World of Board Games. I'm coming to you from Groundswell Cafe in Las Vegas, where you can find legit coffee and board games. This series is designed to teach you all you need to know about the wonderful world of board games. From genres to themes to mechanisms, I want to provide an overview to help people understand the breadth and details of this industry that appears to still be in the middle of a golden age, golden era, or even renaissance. I'd like these videos to be kind of a Detective Friday, just the facts ma'am approach, in order to keep them short and concise, being the minimum that you need to understand a thing, and then I'll provide links and other resources for you if you want to take a deeper dive into the subject. If you don't know who Detective Friday is, then I guess I'm old, so yay! Speaking of facts, I'd like to define what I mean when I'm talking about board games. First, I'm talking about what one might call designer games or niche games. Games that go beyond the usual like Monopoly, Life, Sorry, or party games that most of us have been exposed to. Games that you can't readily find at Target, Walmart, or Toys R Us. Rest in peace. Even though many of today's greatest selling niche games are actually being stocked in these stores, and places like Barnes & Noble have really transformed their board game section into an impressive array of beautiful designer games. Also, an interesting etymology lesson is that when the term board game was first coined, the word board actually meant flat surface or plank, so basically a table. So board games for me really means anything that can be played on a flat surface or tabletop. It doesn't have to have its own board that it's played on. It's just an all-encompassing term for any game that can be played on a flat surface or tabletop, so even games that are 100% cards can be included. Some of what I'm going to talk about, I was first made keen on because of Quentin Smith, aka Quins from Shut Up and Sit Down, one of the best resources out there for board games, gave a talk called Board Gaming's Golden Age. Please check it out if you'd like to know more, as he was a video game journalist for 10 years before discovering and switching over to board game journalism. The video is from 2012, but it is even more relevant now than it was 6 years ago. All that said, on to the subject of the video, which is basically, how did we get here? Not here on Earth, that's kind of a larger conversation, but how did we get to where we're at with board games taking the world by storm? I mean, the fact that board game cafes and pubs are popping up all over the world is an entirely new thing. So let's find out a little more about what's going on. First, board games have been a part of human civilization for thousands of years. The first game that we have record of is called Senet, and it goes back all the way to 3100 BC. To put that into perspective, imagine going back in time all the way to the year 0, and then from that point, going further over 1.5 times the amount you just traveled. Now that's a long time. And pictured here is a version that was inscribed for Amenhotep III around 1390 BC. It was basically a game which represented the journey of one's soul to the afterlife. So needless to say, throughout the ages, humans have had an interest in playing games. But board games have seen a rise in popularity over the last 18 years that has caused the industry to see tremendous growth year over year. For instance, in 1999, there were only about 1,000 new games published, but last year, there were over 3,600, and if you include expansions in that number, the number is over 5,000! At the time Quins gave his talk, board game sales were going up 10 to 20% every single year. A quick Google search, and I was able to find out that in 2016 in the US, board game sales went up 28%. That is just phenomenal growth. So what we have seen as a result is the hobby just spreading, and not only more and more games, but the games are actually getting better because new designs that come out are building upon something that's already come before, and we're just getting all new fun experiences. Now at this point, you may be asking, why is this happening? Why this recent phenomena of popularity and growth that has been sweeping the world? I believe reason number one is that around the turn of the century, German-style board games started being exported to the rest of the world. And what they had going on was games with a sort of elegance to them. They really embraced the physicality of board games, with chunky wooden bits and thick quality cardstock, and they just looked good. On top of that, they were a lot more accessible. An American niche game may have had around a 20-page manual, while for a German-style board game, it'd be just a few pages. And it's not so much about the theme of the game, but about the strategy that lies within. And they are also not quite as confrontational, and they also didn't suffer from the problem where, there might be kind of a runaway leader at the beginning of the game, and you know who's going to win before you're even that far into the game. And these are things that most designers today try to avoid. But without a doubt, one of the biggest influences in board games today is the Settlers of Catan, which has now been renamed Catan. In Catan, you're trying to settle on an island, but resources are limited, and the other players settlements are going to get in your way. It's now 23 years old, but still immensely popular, despite all the innovations that have come since. One of these things this game did that I think turned family games on their cardboard heads is that instead of using dice to just roll and move a piece and then have a very limited number of actions you can take depending on where you land, the dice in Catan are actually used to determine which spaces of land generate resources. If you have a settlement on that land, then you get to generate the resources from that land. Not only you, but everyone else on that given turn. So if it's your turn, you're going to roll the dice, and let's say you roll a 6, and so any territory that has a 6 in it, whoever has settlements on the border of that territory is going to get those resources. In the original Catan, like I said, you are explorers trying to settle an island, and it's kind of like, the New World type explorer era. You're getting clay for brick, sheep for wool, wood, and other resources in order to build your roads and your settlements and upgrade them and do all those sorts of things. But what I have in front of me right here is a retheming of Catan. This is Star Trek Catan. It can play exactly the same as original Catan, except instead of lands, you have planets. Instead of the general resources like sheep and clay, you have food, oxygen, water, dilithium, and tritanium. So it's just everything is changed to fit in the Star Trek universe. They also had the addition of being able to have support crew members, which can kind of give you an extra ability to activate. But if you play without those crew members, you could play Star Trek Catan exactly like regular Catan and have just this gorgeous theme going on where you have all of your little starships. Instead of roads, you connect your bases with starships, and then you have your star bases and your outposts that you'll build instead of settlements and cities. So I'm going to use Star Trek Catan for the rest of the explanation of how Catan works. So on your turn, during your build phase, you could turn in resources you've gotten in order to, in original Catan, build roads, but in Star Trek Catan, you will put out starships. And then you can also turn in specific resources to build outposts. And then instead of, like in regular Catan, upgrading settlements to cities, you can upgrade outposts into star bases. And so outposts are all worth a point. Star bases are worth 2 points. And there's other ways to get points, like with development cards. So you can also turn in resources for development cards. So you would draw a development card. So this allows you a special ability, but you can draw some of these cards, which are just straight victory points. And there are also ways, so in original Catan, if you have the longest road, you're going to be holding on to this that says you're going to be getting 2 points. So it's always adding 2 points. So if somebody else suddenly has the longest road, they're going to take this. Of course, in Star Trek Catan, it's the longest supply route. So the person with the most ships connecting in one line. And of course, it has to be at least 5 sections of road or 5 starships long before you get this. So the first person to get to 5 is going to take this. It's going to give them 2 extra points. So if they by any chance already had 8 points, they're going to win the game because it's the first person to get 10 points. And that's basically it. So first person to get 10 points. So you just build your outposts, you bring your starships out, you get objectives, and you get points. First person to 10 wins. So as you can see, there's much more room for clever ideas and strategies that you can use instead of just moving a piece, doing what the space tells you and everything. But even by today's standards, the dice in this game can be somewhat limiting because they could just never go your way where you've built outposts, and you could just be helpless to really get anything going. In fact, so many games today, they don't even use dice, but they have some other form of selecting which actions you can take, which leaves you many more choices to determine what course you take. It's just massively more rewarding when you are the thing responsible for when you do well, not just some random result of dice. And at the same time, if you don't do well, it's also your fault, because the less chance and the more strategy in a game, the more it's your decisions that affect the outcome. And all of this just makes you want to play more and do better next time. So these German-style games were hugely influential in making games that had a higher depth but greater simplicity. And they began melting together with those American-style games with greater theme and story. And what you've had since then is just an enormous amount of amazing things. Reason number 2, I believe, is that we humans are social creatures. And video games, as they advanced, they became much more interesting than the board games that were easily accessible. And as time went on, they started going online. So then we started playing alone, sitting on our couch or at our desk. And the only interaction we were really having with people was possibly a headset that we could use to talk to people. But it wasn't really true bonding or interaction. It was usually just something like, okay, you go over there, shoot those guys, and I'll get the flag. Or, maybe just a whole bunch of, shouting and cursing that some people would do. So on top of that, TV and movies have become easier to watch anywhere, anytime we want, any show we want, any movie we want. And technology was just kind of removing the requirement to be present with other people when we engaged in relaxation and entertainment. But in all of us is still this desire or even need to be physically present with other humans and interact with them and have fun. And board games are just a huge facilitator of this. And as board games get better, people are discovering them and rediscovering how much fun it is to sit around a table and interact with other humans. So as technology made us interact with our family and friends less, we forgot how to put down the phone/tablet/computer or turn off the TV and just enjoy being together. So it's just a wonderful time to discover this hobby right now, as the choices have such an enormous spectrum that many hold the belief that there's a game for everyone that isn't just Monopoly, Life, or the other games that we've become accustomed to and have just been the everyday choices for a long time. In fact, these classic games like Monopoly have seen their sales either even out or even decline just because people are discovering that there are so many games that are just as accessible, if not more so, and are just more fun. For instance, do you like gardening? Well, there are a ton of options that offer different complexity and styles. Or maybe you like space exploration and you want to start up a galactic civilization and then do epic battle against your foes. Well, there's a lot of options for that as well. Today we have games that vary from light and easy to teach and anyone can play to games that are just massive beasts that take hours to play a single session, or maybe take hundreds of plays to get through all the content. I'm looking at you, Gloomhaven. So in this series, I'm going to go through all the different aspects of board games as I possibly can in easy to digest bite-sized chunks. So whether you are trying to explain to your family and friends just what this thing is that has grabbed your heart and mind, or whether you want to understand the different options or details that are out there, this series is going to have something for you. So stay tuned, because episode 2 is going to be on the subject of gateway games. Games that tend to be lighter, easier to teach, and just about anyone can play, but that have a greater depth and are just different from what we have become accustomed to over the years. So until then, thanks for watching. I hope you like this video. Please remember to give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and be sure to click that bell to get notifications every time I come out with a new video. Also, I'm going to be putting a bunch of links in the description that'll take you to a bunch of resources to help you on your board game journey, like the biggest resource of games there is right now called BoardGameGeek.com, as well as the aforementioned Shut Up and Sit Down, and of course Geek and Sundry, which is started by Felicia Day and is just an epicenter of gamer and geek culture, where Will Wheaton, aka Wesley Crusher from Star Trek, started his show Tabletop, which was 100% responsible for getting me into the hobby, and I believe was just massively influential in the board game explosion that has happened today. So once again, thanks for watching, and as I like to always say, game on, end of line.